The empire that once bragged about surviving Western sanctions is now quietly suffocating under the weight of its own war machine, and no one inside the Kremlin can stop it. Right now, behind the carefully built facade of confidence, something truly catastrophic is happening to Russia's war-driven economy. Not in the distant future, not creeping slowly over the horizon. It is happening in real time, and it's accelerating. In just the first 3 months of 2025, Vladimir Putin has spent $25.5 billion, an amount so enormous that it has already shattered the government's carefully planned annual budget. This is not just a warning sign. This is the sound of an economic engine locking up in mid-flight. The war chest that once stood at a staggering $150 billion has now been gutted down to just $38 billion. And while these numbers are shocking enough on their own, what makes them even more alarming is the fact that Russia cannot slam the brakes. The state is trapped in a deadly loop where every single day forces an impossible choice: either feed the war machine or keep the civilian economy alive. And every single day, the Kremlin is choosing the war. Defense spending has now exploded to 6.3% of the entire economy, a level not seen since the final desperate years of the Soviet Union. It is as though the country is consuming itself from the inside out, just to keep the war effort alive. The damage is visible everywhere. Around 73% of Russian companies cannot find workers, not because the workers have vanished, but because they've been dragged into the battlefield. The civilian labor force is being hollowed out, leaving factories standing still, construction projects abandoned, and small businesses gasping for survival. Inflation has surged to 9.4%, crushing household budgets. And even with punishingly high interest rates meant to slow spending, prices are refusing to cool down. It's like trying to put out a raging wildfire by throwing gasoline on top of it. But here is the darkest part. The Kremlin is fully aware of all of this, and is still pressing ahead. The collapse of confidence became undeniable at what was supposed to be Russia's big moment of triumph, its flagship International Economic Forum. Traditionally, this annual event is meant to showcase Russia's strength, lure foreign investment, and project an image of unstoppable momentum. Instead, it turned into something completely different: a public confession of economic failure. Maxim Reshetnikov, Russia's Minister of Economic Development, stood before a hall expecting celebration and admitted bluntly, "Based on current business sentiment, it seems to me we are on the brink of transitioning into recession." The room went silent. This was not what investors had come to hear. Then came the knockout blow. Elvira Nabiullina, the head of the Central Bank of Russia, warned, "We have been growing for 2 years at a fairly high rate, due to the fact that free labor resources were used. But we need to understand that many of these resources have really been exhausted." Exhausted. That was the word Putin's own chief economic commander used to describe the war economy. The resources are drained, the engine is sputtering. Panic spread quickly inside the regime. Other officials scrambled to undo the damage, frantically trying to pretend that nothing serious was wrong. Anton Silvanov, the finance minister, actually compared the crisis to cold weather, claiming that the economy was simply cooling down and that summer always follows winter. It was a surreal display. Russia's top financial authorities trying to spin an economic collapse as if it were a seasonal breeze. But reality refused to be hidden. Only a few months earlier, Russia was boasting about 4.5% GDP growth in late 2024. By the first quarter of 2025, that number had fallen to just 1.4%. This is not a slowdown, this is a stall. And the reason is crystal clear. The artificial boom created by massive war spending has finally run out of fuel. For 3 years, military spending was pumped into the economy like a powerful drug, hiding the rot underneath. But now the illusion is breaking apart. Even Putin himself, normally obsessed with projecting strength, was forced to issue a public warning that this situation must not be allowed under any circumstances. When the man who started this war is publicly acknowledging the danger of economic collapse, it means the fire has already reached the core. To see how quickly the situation is falling apart, just look at the numbers. Russia ended 2024 with a $34.4 billion deficit. That alone should have triggered alarm bells. But in just the first quarter of 2025, They have already burned through $25.5 billion. They planned for a small deficit for the entire year. Instead, they are spending at triple the planned pace, and the year is not even halfway through. The National Welfare Fund, which was supposed to be Russia's safety net, has been gutted. Before the invasion of Ukraine, it stood tall at $150 billion. Today, it is just $38 billion. Putin has burned through 3/4 of the country's rainy day fund in under 3 years, and here lies the critical danger. The faster these reserves disappear, the more the government will be forced to raid pensions, slash social services, or print more money just to keep afloat. Each of those choices carries the risk of triggering something even worse. Hyperinflation, mass protests, or even a run on the banks. Meanwhile, the labor crisis has become impossible to conceal. Hundreds of thousands of men have been conscripted or killed. Nearly 3 out of 4 Russian companies are unable to find workers. It's a catastrophic shortage that no amount of propaganda can solve. Factories are delaying deliveries. Farms are missing planting seasons. Infrastructure projects are being postponed indefinitely, and the few workers left are demanding higher wages just to survive soaring prices, which in turn pushes inflation even higher. It is a vicious circle: less labor, higher costs, lower productivity, and an economy grinding closer to a halt. Even the informal labor markets that once filled the gaps are drying up. Migrant workers from Central Asia are leaving Russia in droves, scared off by conscription raids and falling wages. The labor pool is running on fumes, and there is nothing left to replenish it. In an attempt to tame runaway inflation, the central bank has pushed interest rates to painfully high levels. But this so-called solution is strangling what remains of the civilian economy. Businesses cannot afford new loans. Startups are dying before they even begin. Home construction has frozen in place. Small shops are shutting down because their credit lines have vanished. This is an economic death spiral. Raise rates to slow inflation and you kill growth. Cut rates to spark growth and prices shoot up again. There is no safe way out, and the Kremlin knows it. That is why the tone from Russia's top officials has shifted from proud defiance to quiet dread. They are trapped and the walls are closing in. The most dangerous part of all is that they cannot stop. If the Kremlin slashes defense spending to save the economy, the war effort collapses. If they keep funding the war, the civilian economy dies. Either option leads to disaster. This is why defense spending has swelled to 6.3% of the total GDP, the highest since the Soviet collapse. Every hospital, every school, every business is being bled dry to keep tanks rolling and missiles flying. Russia's economy is no longer a normal economy. It has become a war machine wearing the decaying skin of a civilian state. All the warning signals point to an approaching breaking point. The reserves are almost gone. The workforce is gutted. Inflation is raging. Growth has nearly vanished. And every new day of war speeds up the implosion. Western sanctions have not simply failed, despite what Kremlin propaganda claims. They have forced Russia into a deadly choice: total militarization or total collapse. And Putin has chosen militarization, even if it burns the entire economy down to ashes. The clock is ticking. Once the National Welfare Fund is fully drained, the government will have no choice but to raid pensions and social programs or turn on the printing presses. Either path leads to instability, protests, and potentially revolt. And if oil prices drop or export revenues falter, the collapse could hit suddenly, like a dam bursting without warning. That is why Russia is now openly censoring economic data. The government has started classifying oil export numbers, withholding budget breakdowns, and restricting access to industrial production figures. They are trying to blind their own people and the world to just how bad the situation really is. Because the truth is brutally simple: the war economy that was supposed to make Russia stronger is now destroying it from within. Behind the grand parades and defiant speeches, the Kremlin is desperately trying to stop a financial hemorrhage it can no longer control. And the more they deny it, the faster it gets worse. For years, the Kremlin sold the myth of economic resilience. They bragged about Fortress Russia, about surviving sanctions, about being untouchable. But Fortress Russia is crumbling from the inside. Its walls are hollow, its foundation is cracking, and the world is beginning to see the truth. Every new tank rolling off the assembly line comes at the cost of a shuttered factory, an abandoned farm, or an empty grocery shelf. Every missile fired means another hospital without medicine, another school without teachers. Russia is not winning this economic war, and it is slowly bleeding. out while pretending to stand tall. This is why even Putin himself is sounding alarms. He knows that if this spiral keeps going, it won't just end the war. It could end his entire regime. Russia is standing at the edge of a cliff. The ground beneath it is breaking apart and the weight of the war is dragging it down. The collapse is not something far in the future. It has already started. The only question left is how quickly and how violently it will all fall apart.